Alright, so before we start the values and the shading process of the hands, I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about how to complete your value study, okay? And if you do not have a printer, or if you would prefer to just do this in your sketchbook, that is 100% okay. If you have drawing pencils, you are more than welcome to use them. I will probably be able to lend out some of these for your projects if you're a student that's in class, but I also want you to know that a number 2 mechanical pencil is completely fine to use for this project or for this assignment, and also the hand assignment as well. Don't feel like you need to go out and buy these, although they are very nice, and there is a separate video explaining how to use these based on the numbers and letters. But one thing I want to show you is that out of these drawing pencils, this drawing pencil right here is specifically called an HB, and if you read the label on your mechanical pencil, it says number 2, but it also says HB. Okay, so HB, HB, these are the same thing. Alright, but what these do is these just offer different types of shading abilities for each pencil. Okay, so like I said, if you want to use drawing pencils, that's totally fine, but I also want you to know that most students will be using either a wooden number 2 pencil, a mechanical number 2 pencil, either or. So here's how this works. What you're going to do, if you're at home and you have access to a printer and you want to print this out and complete it, that's totally fine. If not, what I would like you to do is I would like you to replicate this template on this sketchbook page in your sketchbook. Okay? So here's how this works. We're going to be doing a value study, and it's going to help us become familiar with our values so that when we do our projects and our sketchbook assignments, I'm sorry, I just messed that up. We're not going to divide up the bottom one because we're going to do something different there. Let me erase that. So you're going to divide this up into 10 boxes. Okay? Does it need to be perfect? No, it doesn't need to be perfect. Could you use a ruler? Sure, you could use a ruler. One thing that you could do is you could actually trace your ruler from 1 all the way to 10. So from 1 to 10. And then what you could do is you could put a little mark at every inch, making these perfect boxes so that it looks nice and neat. And then you can hang on to this for the future. So you could kind of sketch it out like this too if you wanted to make it a little bit neater. If you're super neat, you could take your ruler and divide these up as well. Okay, but you don't really need to do that. Okay, so we just need to complete this value study. Now the way that a value scale works is you have a scale of a certain amount of boxes. Okay, this scale has 10 boxes, right? So there's 10 total boxes. So here's how this looks. If you had 4 boxes, then obviously your highest number would be 4, and that would be your darkest value. But since we have 10 boxes, it's going to go 1, and you can label these. I actually would like you to label these. I must have messed up somewhere, but no big deal. I can add another box. So we have 9, and we have 10. And so this is how your value scale should start out. Jeez, I am making so many mistakes. So your value scale is going to start out with 10 boxes. And no matter how many boxes are in your value scale, 10 is always going to be your darkest value. And your lowest number is always going to be your lightest value. Okay? If you had a 0, a lot of people always ask, well, what if there's a 0? 0 would actually be white. Okay? And if we could even go above a 10, there'd be black. But a lot of times our graphite, it can't really get to a black color because it's just one simple color in graphite. So what you're going to do is you're going to start your value scale, and I usually like to start with the darkest value, and I'm going to press down as hard as I can. Okay, so I'm pressing down as hard as I can with the number 10, and if you're doing it on the printout, it's going to look something like this. If you're doing it in your sketchbook, you can make it something like that. Okay? So you have your number 10 value, and that's as hard as you can press down. When you move on to number 9, your number 9 value, you're going to push down almost as hard as you can. Alright, so almost as hard as you can. You're not pressing down as hard as you can. Number 10, this is as hard as you can go. So a couple things you might notice. You might notice that your lead actually breaks a few times while shading in the number 10. That's because you're pressing down as hard as you possibly can with whatever pencil you have. Okay? The other thing you may notice is that your paper might even start to wrinkle up. That's because you are compressing the paper so much that it's actually starting to spread and it gets those waves. Okay, that's because you're pressing down absolutely as hard as you can with the pencil without breaking it. Okay? Number 9 is very similar. We're just letting up just a little bit with the pressure. And you're going to get a value that's very dark. It's just not quite as dark as number 10. When you go to number 8, and notice I'm doing this all with the mechanical pencil. When you go to number 8, you're going to press down very hard, but not quite as hard as you press down for number 9. One little side note is that I am only shading in part of it, and that's just for the sake of this video so that it doesn't go on and on and on. But you should fill in the entire square. Number 7, I'm going to press down pretty hard, but not quite as hard as I press down for the number 8. And now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what I call SCC, and that would stand for small consecutive circles. What I like to do when I'm shading in is I like to use what's called small consecutive circles. Do I always use small consecutive circles? No, I don't always use small consecutive circles, but it's a really good practice for when you're shading because number 1, it keeps you small, keeps you in control. Consecutive keeps things smooth, and the circles help blend the values together. It's kind of like mixing. Like if you're baking something and you're trying to mix in ingredients and keep things nice and smooth and consistent, then you would actually use these small circular motions. So as I go down my scale, every box that I get into, I want to start pressing down less and less as I get closer to number 1. Okay, so I'm going to get to 2, which is very light. I'm actually barely even pressing the pencil down on the paper. And then number 1 is so light. I'm trying to press down as light as I possibly can with that pencil. So this is what the value scale is going to look like, except you're going to complete the entire box with small consecutive circles. Okay, moving on. The gradation scale. So this one, with no boxes, is gradation. Now, what does gradation mean? Gradation is a gradual change from light to dark. Alright, so I'm going to show you this, and I'm going to do this with my drawing pencils just to give those of you that have these an idea of what it would look like. So if I'm going to start with my darkest value, I even wrote the numbers here so you would know. Okay, I'm not going to do small consecutive circles around the edges because I want to keep it nice and neat. So I like to shade along the edges, and then I'll probably start doing that circular motion. Okay, so the reason why these numbers are here, it's not to divide them like this. What that does is it gives me a nice reference so that whenever I'm doing this value, I can look up and see what number I should be on. And I should be on the corresponding value in the value scale above as well. So I'm going to go ahead and shade this in. I'm going to stick with a 6B. If you don't know what that means, you can hop over to the how to use drawing pencils tutorial. And I'm going to stick with this 6B until I get to about number 8. And then I'm going to switch it over to a pencil that gives me just a little bit of a lighter value, such as a 4B. Oh, my 4B is broken. I'm going to go to a 2B. Notice that the 2B is a big jump. From 6B to 2B is a pretty big jump. So when I do this, I'm going to have to press down a little bit harder. And maybe, maybe even go back with my 6B just to kind of blend that out a little bit. Okay, but the goal for this is to gradually change from light to dark. Okay, so where's my 2B? Let's take my 2B. And I'm not going to do small consecutive circles because, like I said, for the sake of time, small consecutive circles usually take a lot longer, but it comes out much nicer. But what you'll notice as you work through your value scale, you are going to gradually get lighter and lighter until you get all the way down to number 1. Okay, so I'll switch over to a B. And I'm just shading this in kind of quickly. Hopefully you guys take your time with this and do it a little bit differently than I'm doing it. But this should gradually get lighter and lighter. One thing with shading that I want to talk about, because I actually just did this since I'm rushing a little bit. When you shade, the reason why we don't typically shade the way that I am is because what happens is when you go in and start shading these values, let me just show you what I mean here. Okay, do you see how if I'm trying to get a smooth gradation, do you see this edge right here that you can still see? That's what we want to try to avoid. So we actually want to smooth this out, and we want the colors to blend together a lot nicer than they are when it just jumps from one value to the next. So I'm going to go in, and I really want to try to smooth this out. Sometimes adding those circles over it will help, but if you use small consecutive circles, you're actually going to avoid this problem right off the get-go, and it's going to help you in the long run. That's why I always recommend doing the circles, because they're usually a lot smoother, and you don't get those separation, that separation with your values. Okay. So anyway, you would continue this all the way to, like I said, if you have a mechanical pencil, that's fine, but you're going to continue it all the way to the 1 value, okay? And so this should be shaded in completely. The last little tip that I want to show you is that, and this is a very old school trick, at these values right here. So again, this is how it works. Number 10, hold it to the lead. 9, 8, 7, 6. All right, 5 value, 3 value, 8 value, 10 value. Okay, so that's a little tip, and hopefully that can help you with your values.